But here's the problem. You don't want them back consciously. Consciously, you still believe those traits are bad, wrong, dangerous, so you can't own them in yourself. Instead, you own them through the other person. You get to experience your own anger, but it's their anger. You get to experience your own selfishness, but it's their selfishness. You get to experience your own chaos, but it's their chaos. This is the unconscious contract. This video examines destructive relationship patterns through the symbolic language of mythology and depth psychology. It explores concepts from Jungian shadow work, attachment theory, and philosophical inquiry into the nature of projection and unconscious choice. The goal is not to provide quick fixes or romanticize toxic relationships, but to illuminate the psychological mechanisms that drive repetitive attraction to people who cause harm. This content is intended for educational and reflective purposes, offering a framework for self-examination and growth through philosophical and psychological understanding. If you're currently in an abusive relationship, please seek professional support. This video is not a substitute for therapy or crisis intervention. Now let's begin. There's a pattern you keep repeating. You meet someone. The attraction is immediate, undeniable, almost irrational. Something about them pulls you in with a force you can't explain. And then, inevitably, the same story unfolds. The same conflicts, the same pain, the same ending. You tell yourself, this time will be different, but it never is. This video explores why that happens, not through blame, not through victimhood, but through a lens that combines ancient mythology, depth psychology, and philosophical inquiry. We'll examine how the unconscious mind actively seeks certain people, not randomly, but with surgical precision. We'll explore the shadow, the parts of yourself you've rejected, buried, exiled, and how those rejected parts don't disappear. They return to you, wearing the face of someone you'll fall in love with. This isn't self-help. This is psychological archaeology. We'll use the myth of Hades and Persephone not as a story to believe, but as a symbolic map of internal processes that still operate in you today. Myth, psychology, and philosophy converge here to offer you not comfort, but clarity. Not solutions, but understanding. And through understanding, the possibility of conscious choice rather than unconscious compulsion. This is difficult territory. It will challenge how you see yourself, your past relationships, and the patterns you've been calling bad luck. If you're ready, let's descend. The shadow marriage. You've probably heard the myth of Persephone. A young woman gathering flowers in a meadow is suddenly seized by Hades, god of the underworld. The earth splits open beneath her feet. She's dragged down into darkness, into a realm she never chose to enter. Her mother Demeter searches desperately for her. The world above withers and dies in grief. Most people read this as a story about abduction, about violation, about a victim and a villain. But what if that's not what the myth is actually about? What if Persephone's descent wasn't an accident, but a necessity? What if the underworld wasn't a prison, but the place where everything you've buried waits to be reclaimed? And what if Hades wasn't a monster, but the part of you that's been calling from the darkness all along? There's something your unconscious mind knows that your conscious mind refuses to see. You are incomplete. Not in the way self-help culture means it, not in the "you need to love yourself first" way. You're incomplete because at some point in your life, you were forced to cut away parts of yourself to survive, parts that were too loud, too angry, too selfish, too sexual, too free, too powerful, parts that threatened your acceptance, your safety, your belonging. So you buried them. You buried your rage because rage wasn't safe in your family. You buried your desires because desire made you vulnerable. You buried your power because power made others uncomfortable. You buried your chaos because chaos didn't fit the image you needed to project, and you thought that was the end of it. But the psyche doesn't work that way. What you bury doesn't die. It waits. It ferments. It gathers energy in the darkness. And then, when you least expect it, it returns. Not as a memory, not as a thought, as a person. This is the part. No one tells you about attraction. You think you choose people based on compatibility, shared values, physical attraction, or emotional connection. But beneath all of that, something else is operating, something older, something that doesn't care about your conscious preferences. Your unconscious mind is hunting. It's hunting for the traits you rejected in yourself. It's hunting for the qualities you learned to hate, fear, or suppress. It's hunting for the shadow. And when it finds someone who embodies those traits, someone who is openly angry when you've learned to be nice, someone who is unapologetically selfish when you've learned to be giving, someone who is chaotic when you've learned to be controlled, your unconscious mind doesn't recoil. It recognizes, and recognition feels like love. This is why your type is always the same person in a different body. Different face, different name, different job, different backstory. Same pattern, same unavailability, same emotional distance, same explosive anger, same withholding behavior, same addiction, same betrayal. You tell yourself you didn't see the red flags. But that's not true. You saw them. You just didn't care. Because on some level, a level you're not consciously aware of, those red flags were green lights. They were signals that this person carries what you've been looking for. Not a partner, not love, your shadow. Let's go deeper into the mechanism. When you were a child, you learned very quickly which parts of yourself were acceptable and which were dangerous. Maybe you expressed anger once and were punished so severely that you learned anger was unacceptable. Maybe you asserted a boundary and were told you were selfish, so you learned that boundaries meant you were bad. Maybe you expressed joy or excitement and were told to calm down, so you learned that vitality was too much. Whatever the specific lessons were, you adapted. You had to. Survival in childhood depends on belonging, and belonging depends on becoming what your environment needs you to be. So you performed an internal amputation. You cut away the parts of yourself that threatened your safety. And for a while, it worked. You became the good child, the pleasing one, the responsible one, the calm one, the one who didn't make waves. But those amputated parts didn't disappear into nothing. They went into the shadow. The shadow is not some mystical, spiritual concept. It's a psychological reality. It's the repository of everything you couldn't afford to be, every trait you learned to despise, every impulse you learned to suppress, every quality you were taught to fear in yourself. And here's the crucial part. The shadow doesn't just sit there quietly. It demands expression. Since you can't express these traits directly, since your identity is now built on not being angry, not being selfish, not being chaotic, your psyche finds another way. Projection. You project these traits onto other people, and then you're either repulsed by them or magnetically attracted to them. When you're repulsed, you get to maintain your identity as not that kind of person. You get to feel morally superior. You get to keep the shadow at a safe distance. But when you're attracted, that's when things get interesting. When you're attracted to someone who embodies your shadow traits, something else is happening. Your unconscious isn't trying to keep the shadow away, it's trying to get it back. This is why the attraction is so powerful. This is why it feels fated, destined, beyond your control. Because it is beyond your conscious control. Your unconscious mind has recognized in this other person the very qualities you've been missing. The vitality you suppressed, the anger you swallowed, the selfishness you were taught to hate, the chaos you learned to fear, and it wants them back. But here's the problem. You don't want them back consciously. Consciously, you still believe those traits are bad, wrong, dangerous, so you can't own them in yourself. Instead, you own them through the other person. You get to experience your own anger, but it's their anger. You get to experience your own selfishness, but it's their selfishness. You get to experience your own chaos, but it's their chaos. This is the unconscious contract. You will carry the light. I will carry the shadow. You will be the good one. I will be the bad one. You will be the victim. I will be the villain. And for a while it works. You get to feel your disowned vitality, but you don't have to take responsibility for it. You get to be close to the qualities you've exiled, but you don't have to integrate them. You get to rage against them, fight them, try to fix them, all while secretly, unconsciously feeding off them. This is the shadow marriage. Now let's talk about why this always ends in destruction. The relationship becomes a battleground, not because you're incompatible, not because they're toxic and you're not, but because you're at war with your own shadow. Every time they express anger, you're triggered. Not because their anger is inappropriate, but because it reminds you of your own buried rage. Every time they prioritize themselves, you feel abandoned, not because they're being selfish, but because you've never allowed yourself that same permission. Every time they create chaos, you panic, not because chaos is inherently bad, but because you've built your entire identity on control. The intensity of your reaction is proportional to the depth of your denial. This is why arguments in these relationships feel existential. Why conflicts feel like life or death. Why you can't just let it go. Because you're not fighting them. You're fighting yourself. And here's the part that will make you uncomfortable. You chose this. Not consciously, not deliberately, but you chose it. Before you ever met them, before the first date, before the first kiss, your unconscious mind had already made a decision. It scanned your environment for someone who would trigger your shadow work, someone who would force you to confront what you've been avoiding. And when it found them, it flooded your system with chemistry, attraction, obsession. Your conscious mind thought it was choosing love. Your unconscious mind knew it was choosing confrontation. This is why people say, I knew better, but I couldn't help it, because two different systems were operating. Your conscious mind saw the red flags. Your unconscious mind saw the opportunity, not for happiness, for wholeness. Let's talk about the mirror. The person who hurts you most is not your opposite. They're your reflection. They're showing you in exaggerated form the very traits you've disowned. And the more violently you react to them, the more clearly they're reflecting something you refuse to see in yourself. This is why you can list their flaws with surgical precision. Why you can see exactly what's wrong with them. Why you can diagnose their issues, their patterns, their failures, because you know them intimately, not because you've studied them, because they're you. The rage you feel when they're irresponsible, that's your own buried irresponsibility demanding recognition. The disgust you feel when they're selfish, that's your own forbidden selfishness trying to surface. The terror you feel when they're out of control, that's your own suppressed chaos knocking at the door. Every criticism you level at them is a criticism you've been leveling at yourself, unconsciously for years. And until you recognize that, you'll keep fighting them and losing. Here's what most people do at this point. They leave. They finally gather the strength to end the relationship. They block the number. They move to a new city. They swear they'll never repeat the pattern. And then 6 months later, they meet someone new. Different face, different background, different job, same pattern. Because leaving the person doesn't end the pattern. The pattern isn't between you and them. The pattern is between you and your shadow. And your shadow goes wherever you go. This is the integration wound. You think the problem is external. You think if you just find the right person, someone healthy, someone stable, someone who doesn't carry all that darkness, then everything will be fine. But you will find that person profoundly boring, because what you're actually attracted to isn't stability. It's your own disowned intensity. It's the parts of yourself you haven't reclaimed. Stable people don't trigger you. They don't activate the shadow. They don't offer you the opportunity to confront what you've been avoiding. So you'll feel nothing. Or you'll feel safe but empty. Or you'll feel grateful but not alive. And eventually, you'll drift away. Or you'll cheat. Or you'll sabotage it in some subtle way. And then you'll be back in the pattern. Not because you're broken, because you're incomplete. And the only way to stop repeating the pattern is to stop outsourcing the shadow. Integration is not the same as acceptance. Acceptance says, I accept that I have anger in me. Integration says, I am angry and that anger is mine to wield. Acceptance is still observing from a distance. Integration is ownership. And ownership is terrifying because when you integrate your shadow, you can't be the good person anymore. You can't be the victim anymore. You can't be the one who's always right, always trying, always giving. You have to become whole. And whole people are not always nice. Whole people have boundaries that feel selfish to others. Whole people have anger that makes others uncomfortable. Whole people have desires that threaten the status quo. Whole people have chaos that disrupts carefully constructed order. This is why most people choose repetition over integration. Repetition is familiar. Repetition allows you to keep your identity intact. Repetition lets you stay the victim, the giver, the good one. Integration requires you to die, not physically, but psychologically. The person you've been, the one built on rejecting your shadow, has to dissolve. And what emerges on the other side is someone you don't fully recognize yet. Someone who can hold both light and darkness. Someone who can be kind and furious. Someone who can give and withhold. Someone who can be stable and wild. This is the dangerous integration, and it doesn't make you more likable. It makes you more real. Now we return to the myth. Persephone doesn't stay in the underworld forever, but she doesn't return unchanged. She eats the pomegranate seeds. She's no longer the innocent maiden gathering flowers. She's been marked by the darkness. She's learned to rule in the underworld, and when she returns to the surface, she brings that knowledge with her. She becomes the goddess of spring and the queen of the dead. She moves between two worlds. She holds the duality. This is the shadow marriage within. Not a marriage to another person, a marriage of your own opposites. Light and shadow. Conscious and unconscious. Maiden and queen. Hades in this reading is not external. He's the internal masculine principle, the power, the depth, the darkness that you've been refusing to claim. Persephone is not passive victim. She's the consciousness that descends, confronts, integrates, and transforms. The marriage happens internally. And when it does, something shifts in your external reality. Here's what changes when you integrate your shadow. You stop being attracted to people who embody it. Not because you've healed and become whole in some spiritual sense, but because you no longer need them to carry it for you. When you own your anger, you're not drawn to angry people. When you own your selfishness, you're not drawn to selfish people. When you own your chaos, you're not drawn to chaotic people. The magnetic pull disappears. Not because those traits aren't there, but because they're no longer projected. And suddenly, you have choice. Conscious choice. You can choose relationships based on compatibility, mutual growth, genuine connection, not based on unconscious shadow contracts. You can see red flags and actually walk away. You can feel attracted to someone and still say no. You can be alone without feeling incomplete. This is the paradox. Only when you stop needing the shadow relationship does it become possible to have a conscious relationship. Only when you marry yourself internally does external marriage become possible. Not necessary, but possible. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. Not, why do I keep attracting toxic people, but what part of myself am I still refusing to claim? What anger have you buried? What selfishness have you condemned? What power have you rejected? What chaos have you controlled out of existence? Those are the answers. Those are the parts of yourself that keep showing up in other people, demanding your attention, demanding integration. And until you turn toward them, until you stop fighting them in external form and start reclaiming them internally, you will keep repeating the pattern. Different person, same shadow, same marriage. The descent is not optional. Persephone didn't choose to go to the underworld, but once she was there, she had a choice: resist or integrate. Most people resist. They fight the darkness. They try to escape. They blame Hades for taking them down there. But the ones who transform, they stop fighting. They eat the pomegranate seeds. They claim their throne in the underworld. And then, when they return to the surface, they bring the darkness with them, not as enemy, but as power. This is the shadow marriage. Not a relationship with another person, a relationship with yourself. The parts you've loved and the parts you've hated, the light you've shown and the darkness you've hidden, the consciousness you've claimed and the unconscious you've denied. When those two finally meet, finally recognize each other, finally unite. That's when the pattern ends. That's when you stop seeking completion in someone else. That's when you become whole, not perfect, not healed in the way the world means it, but whole, dangerously, uncomfortably, powerfully whole. The myth continues in you right now. The question is, will you keep running from the underworld, or will you finally descend